All right, 111 folks, you'll have to pardon the headgear, but I've got someone working around the house, and I'm actually working from the house. So if you hear a little bit of drill noise and stuff in the background, well, I tried to put on the headset to kind of drown out that with the mic. So we were talking about Unit 2. We were talking about China, which is Chapter 4. We were talking about the Shang Dynasty and a lot of the beliefs that come up, the cultural shift, the philosophical beliefs, looking at the Taoism, looking at Confucian principles, looking at legalism as it's about to sprout up. What we're going to look at is Shang is huge because it extends for a period of time. It makes that transition into the Bronze Age, but also we look at something unusual. We look at the birth of chariots and military technology that are hugely important at this particular point, because that military transition with the military transition, with the chariot itself, allows them to conquer. Well, here's what's going to happen is we know they're going to slowly start to fall apart because they're not a kind administrative place. All right, that they're indeed going to rule with that iron fist and implement a little bit of that legalism, not completely, but a little bit of that as well. And so what's going to happen is they're going to be supplanted, because as they expand, they're going to run into another group. And one of the groups they run into is going to be the Chow, because there are several existing societies. And when we look at history, we look at the most dynamic, the most controlling. And what will happen is the Chow will go ahead and rise up. And what we're going to see is that they're going to displace the Shang. They are going to unify other forces. It's not hard for them to do, to find people to back them, find people to agree with them, because the Shang are going to be harsh rulers. And so what's going to happen is they're going to rise up. The Chow are interesting because they're going to develop, in reaction to some of the other groups around them, they're going to interact with another group called the Jin. The Jin later on we discover is a little bit closer up to Mongolia, a little bit closer, towards the northern edges of what they consider barbarian societies. They are pastoralists, and what's going to influence them is the fact that these pastoralists are going to incorporate cavalry, into their war situation. And so the Chow will incorporate cavalry. They will learn the tactics, and this can go ahead and help with handling the problem with chariots, and they're going to incorporate with infantry. And so the Chow are going to rise up and cast down the Shang, and they're going to take over. And the thing is a couple of things happen. And why this is important is because what they're going to introduce is the mandate of heaven. Tian, okay, is heaven. Okay, that greater being, that greater idea, that creator being, that majestic ruler. And what's going to happen is when the Chow win, Zhou, they're going to claim the mandate of heaven. They're going to claim, the ruler's going to say, hey, listen, Tian gave me the right to rule. He gave me the mandate of heaven to go over and displace the evil Shang. Okay, the Shang has become corrupt. The Shang had become manipulative. It had become bad in all things that we consider. And so he gave me the right to rule. And you can tell that I have the mandate of heaven because we won. We went ahead and rejected them. We cast them down. We took over. And now we're in charge. And the idea is that he's given the right to rule. The other thing is this, is if he is divined by heaven, he's given that divine right, it's going to change the status of the king. And the king is going to become the descendant of the son of heaven. So he's going to be the son of heaven. And so he's going to achieve divine status as a ruler in addition to just being a ruler. And it's important because there's this right to rule. This Tian, this mandate of heaven, is something that's going to stick around for a while. And what it is it's justification for having staged a rebellion. But it's not going to be just, listen, that we, went ahead and rose up and we won, but it's also going to be signified by other things. If there's a natural disaster, if there's a monsoon, if there's a typhoon, if there's an earthquake, if there's a mudslide, those are other signifiers besides just financial, besides the rising up of people. Those are signifiers that your ruler might have lost his mandate of heaven. And so it gives them a legitimacy. And that legitimacy is what's important, because when the Chow take over, we're going to transition. We're going to take the elements of culture that they have picked up, and they're a frontier culture, but they are definitely influenced by the Shang. So they're going to take the elements of the Shang. They're going to take the elements from the barbarian cultures along the other society. They're going to take the philosophy and implement all that into change. And this is huge because we make the transition at this point into the Iron Age. And so we take these chariots, we take this cavalry, we take this influences. What I thought was interesting is they're going to take the influences of barbaric dress to go ahead and change the military in that fashion as well. But we're going to go ahead and take this new metal, and they're going to rule, but they're not going to rule with the Shang. What's going to happen is the Zhou King is smart enough to say, hey, listen, we overthrew them because they were unjust. We overthrew them because, they were strictly using vassal states. Well, what's going to happen is they're going to make diplomatic ties with the surrounding territories. They're going to take some of the other existing states from the old Shang Empire and implement it in such a way that they'll agree to rule. They'll agree to be ruled, and it is like, listen, here's the rules, here's the emperor. As long as you follow them, then you can go ahead and rule your own way as long as you follow the basic rules. And so what's given is they've got the mandate of heaven. They're going to accept that, but they're going to rule by cooperation. So they're still using vassal states. Those states are still in line, still pledged fealty to the ruler himself. But this is important because what it does is it allows them to still take that diplomatic architecture. It still allows them to take that bureaucracy, but they don't have to rule it with an iron fist, and they're able to spread beyond. And what's going to happen is they're going to spread from the Huanghe, the Yellow River. They're going to go ahead and spread to the coast. They're going to go ahead and spread farther inland where they're at, but they're also going to spread all the way down to the Yangtze. And so we get a pretty good footprint at this particular point, but that's also going to be the problem. Is they're going to come a little bit too expansive. And when they come a little bit too expansive, we start to look at the influences. Okay, this is when we start to look more at, okay, well, gosh, how can we use Confucian principles? How can we use, unfortunate legalist principles? How can we use the Tao in order to help restore this order? And what will happen is the Chow gets too big, kind of like the Roman Empire did. It becomes impossible to administer, starts to break down, and the outer states will start to break away and form kingdoms, and they'll become independent. And over several hundred years, what will happen is they'll declare independence, and in order to maintain the Zhou dynasty, they're going to have to shrink. And so we go from, what's the Zhou to the Western Zhou. We take the Zhou that was here, and we would draw to the base, which is in the West itself. And so we have the Western Zhou. That's the start of the overall breakdown, because what's going to happen is we're going to hit the period they call the spring period, the autumn period, which is the final breakdown of the whole Zhou dynasty itself, and is going to lead into the Warring States period. And the Warring States period is really when Confucius is again active about trying to, hey, let's restore some of this order, let's restore filial piety, let's go ahead and believe in this, and it's going to try to transcend the violence that's happening. Well, what you have is you have 7 states warring. You have 7 states that are the former powers of the Shang and the Zhou, and they're all trying to claim dominance. And the one that's going to do that is going to be the Qin state, and Qin is Qin, Qin, and that's going to form the basis of what we think of as modern China. And what's going to happen is the Qin ruler is going to conquer the surrounding states, and he's going to do it with a unique principle. He's going to say, you know what, no gentlemen, no scholars, no lords, none of this, but everyone is equal. All men of a certain age will be required to join the armed forces. All men are equal until they prove otherwise. I'm going to set up my officers by the number of heads they chop off in battle. So you demonstrate that you are an apt leader. And so he rules by a meritocracy, and this meritocracy is going to enable him to go ahead and conquer. And so what we'll do is he will go ahead and unify China and create that Qin dynasty. And so what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the Qin dynasty and its evolution from there.